I'm Olivia, 28, and my brother just made the biggest mistake of his entitled life. He stood up at his first board meeting as the new director, cleared his throat like some wannabe corporate king, and announced, "My first decision as leader is to fire anyone who doesn't add value to this company. That includes you, sister." The conference room went silent. Dead silent. You could hear Uncle Richard's coffee cup hitting his saucer. You could hear Sandra from accounting's sharp intake of breath. You could hear my brother's career imploding, though he didn't know it yet. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely underestimated by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. I set down my pen slowly, deliberately, the same pen I'd used to sign acquisition deals worth millions while Ryan was getting his third DUI. I looked around the table at faces I'd known for years, good people who'd watched me build strategic partnerships and streamline operations while my baby brother was failing out of business school. Again. "Interesting," I said, my voice steady as granite. I stood up, smoothing my blazer, the one I'd bought with my first bonus, not Daddy's credit card, because as owner of 72% of this company, your first decision as director was also your last. Ryan's face went from smug to confused to absolutely horrified in about 3 seconds flat. If I'm being honest, it was pretty entertaining watching his brain try to process what I had just said. Math was never his strong suit. "Wait, what?" he stammered, and I swear his voice cracked like he was 13 again. 72%? That's not possible. Uncle Richard started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, mind you, but a full-bellied laugh that echoed off the conference room walls. He stood up, walked over to me, and extended his hand like I was visiting royalty. "Well," he said, still chuckling, "I guess it's time to officially pass the crown to the rightful CEO. Olivia, it's been an honor working with you all these years, but I think the company deserves leadership that actually earned their position." The applause was immediate. Sandra started it, then Mike from operations joined in, then the whole room erupted. Everyone except Ryan, of course, who was sitting there looking like someone had just told him Santa Claus was a tax audit. 3 years ago, when Grandpa Henry died, everyone fought over his cars, his watches, his properties. Ryan got the vintage Mustang, Cousin Jake got the lake house, I got what they thought was a consolation prize, 45% of company stock. They were too busy counting their shiny new toys to pay attention to boring old paperwork. Turns out, boring paperwork runs the world. Who knew? Let me take you back to that day 3 years ago, because understanding how I got here requires understanding how spectacularly my family misjudged what really mattered. Grandpa Henry's funeral was on a Tuesday, the will reading was that Friday, and our family attorney, Mr. Davidson, had arranged everything in Grandpa's study exactly as he'd requested, the same room where Grandpa had taught me about balance sheets while my cousins played video games downstairs. Ryan showed up 20 minutes late, naturally, still wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the night before. You could practically smell the regret and cheap beer on him. He slumped into his chair like this whole thing was an inconvenience to his very important schedule of accomplishing absolutely nothing. "To my grandson, Ryan," Mr. Davidson read, "who has always appreciated the finer things in life, I leave my 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback, fully restored, valued at $65,000. Ryan actually whooped out loud at a will reading. My parents exchanged one of those looks, the kind that said, "Well, at least he's excited about something." Cousin Jake got the lake house in Vermont. Cousin Sarah got Grandpa's collection of rare coins and jewelry. Each inheritance came with applause, hugs, and immediate discussions about insurance and storage. Then came my turn. To my granddaughter, Olivia, who has always understood that true wealth isn't what you own, but what you build, I leave 45% of Brennan Industries stock, along with my first business ledger and the fountain pen I used to sign our first major contract. I stared at the papers Mr. Davidson handed me. Stock certificates, legal documents, numbers that didn't immediately translate to anything flashy or Instagrammable. 45%? Ryan scoffed. That's it? That's not even controlling interest. What's she supposed to do with that? Uncle Richard, who was interim CEO at the time, tried to explain the significance, but Ryan had already moved on, asking Dad about insurance for the Mustang. The adults nodded politely at my inheritance, but I could see they were thinking the same thing Ryan had said out loud. What was I supposed to do with minority shares in a family business? They didn't understand that Grandpa had been grooming me for this since I was 16, that he'd shown me every aspect of the business, from supply chain management to client relations, that those boring conversations about market trends and profit margins had been my real inheritance all along. 6 months later, when Dad decided to step back from active management, I made him an offer for his shares. I'd been saving money since college, living below my means while Ryan racked up credit card debt on European vacations and designer watches he couldn't afford. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" Dad asked when I presented the buyout proposal. "It's a lot of money." "I'm sure, Dad. This company means everything to me." He smiled and signed the papers, probably thinking he was helping his responsible daughter invest in her future. He had no idea he was creating the foundation for my brother's very public humiliation 3 years later. The best part? I never told anyone I'd increased my stake to 72%. It wasn't a secret, exactly, just information nobody bothered to ask about. Ryan was too busy crashing his inheritance car 2 months after getting it, and everyone else assumed the business would continue running itself forever. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me, as they say. Though in this case, it was mostly just Ryan. Ryan's relationship with consequences has always been, let's call it, complicated. Picture a grown man playing bumper cars with real life, except every time he crashes, someone else pays for the damage. Take his college experience, for instance. Dad paid full tuition to Northwestern for a business degree that should have taken 4 years. Ryan stretched it into 5 years and 2 academic probations before finally getting kicked out for cheating on his senior capstone project. Not subtle cheating, mind you. He literally turned in someone else's paper with his name on it. The professor called him out in front of the entire class. Ryan's defense? I improved it. The improvements consisted of changing the font from Times New Roman to Arial. Dad still talks about it like it was a character-building experience. Well, he'd say to anyone who'd listen, at least Ryan learned that shortcuts don't work in the real world. Except Ryan didn't learn that, like, at all. 6 months after the college fiasco, he got arrested for DUI. Not his first one either. This was number 3, which in Illinois means serious jail time. But somehow, Dad's lawyer worked out a deal that got Ryan community service and mandatory counseling instead. Ryan treated court-ordered therapy like speed dating. He charmed his way through the sessions, telling counselors what they wanted to hear, while learning absolutely nothing about personal responsibility. He finished his hours picking up trash along highways, which he documented extensively on social media, like he was volunteering for charity instead of paying his debt to society. "Look at how responsible Ryan's becoming," Mom would coo, showing me his Instagram posts. "He's really turning his life around." I wanted to point out that court-mandated community service isn't the same as voluntary charity work, but why ruin her delusions? Then came the Porsche incident. Last year, Ryan decided he needed a car that reflected his status as a future business leader. Never mind that his only business leadership experience was getting fired from 3 different sales jobs for showing up late or not showing up at all. He walked into a dealership and financed a brand new Porsche 911, $78,000. His annual income at the time was around $35,000, and that's when he was actually employed. The monthly payments were more than most people's rent. Within 4 months, he was behind. 6 months in, they repossessed it while he was inside a sports bar, probably telling some girl about his import-export business, which was code for unemployed but well-dressed. Did he learn from this? Did it inspire even a moment of self-reflection about living within his means? Nope. He moved back in with our parents and started driving Mom's Toyota Camry while complaining that it was embarrassing for someone in his position. "What position would that be?" I asked during Sunday dinner. "Professional disappointment." Mom shot me a look that could have wilted lettuce. "Olivia, your brother is going through a rough patch. We all need support sometimes." Ryan's rough patches lasted longer than most people's careers, but he had a gift for making his failures sound like temporary setbacks rather than pattern recognition exercises for the rest of us. The thing about Ryan is he's always been magnetic, charming. He could talk his way into anything and out of everything. Teachers loved him despite his poor grades. Coaches kept him on teams despite missing practice. Girls dated him despite his obvious red flags. Family gatherings became Ryan appreciation societies. His stories got funnier, his plans sounded more ambitious, his next opportunity was always just around the corner, waiting to prove everyone wrong about his potential. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, building client relationships, and actually contributing to the family business, but that wasn't nearly as entertaining as Ryan's latest adventure in self-sabotage. The final straw came when Dad announced his retirement plans at Christmas dinner last year. Ryan immediately started talking about his vision for the company, how he'd modernize operations and expand into new markets. I sat there listening to him pitch ideas I'd presented to the board 6 months earlier, ideas he'd undoubtedly overheard during family conversations and was now regurgitating as his own insights. But Dad was nodding along, looking proud. You know what, son? Maybe it's time to give you some real responsibility, help you grow into the leader I know you can become. That's when I realized my father confused potential with performance, and my brother confused confidence with competence. It was also when I realized I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. Getting my business administration degree wasn't some childhood dream. It was strategic warfare disguised as higher education. While Ryan was flunking out of classes and collecting DUIs like Pokemon cards, I was studying how to run the business he thought he'd inherit just by virtue of being male and charming. The day I graduated summa cum laude, Dad pulled me aside at the celebration dinner. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart, really proud, and I think it's time you put that education to work in the family business." I started as a junior analyst, same entry-level position any college graduate would get. No special treatment, no fast track to the executive floor. Ryan, meanwhile, was living in our parents' basement, recovering from his latest career transition, which was family code for got fired for sleeping with his supervisor's wife. My first project was analyzing our supply chain inefficiencies. Boring stuff, right? Vendor relationships, shipping costs, inventory turnover ratios, the kind of work that makes your eyes glaze over unless you understand that every percentage point of improvement translates to thousands of dollars in profit. I found problems, big ones. Our primary supplier was overcharging us by 18% compared to market rates, but they'd been our vendor for so long that nobody questioned the invoices anymore. I researched alternatives, ran cost-benefit analyses, and presented a proposal that would save the company $200,000 annually. Uncle Richard loved it. Dad was impressed. The board approved my recommendations unanimously. Ryan's response? "Nice work, sis. Maybe next you can figure out why the coffee in the break room tastes like it was filtered through old socks." That became the pattern. I'd solve problems, save money, improve processes. Ryan would make jokes, charm potential clients at company parties, and somehow get credit for having great instincts about people. The worst part wasn't his indifference to actual work. It was his talent for undermining me in public while pretending to be supportive. Like the time I was presenting quarterly projections to our biggest client, Thompson Manufacturing. I'd spent weeks preparing, knew every number by heart, had backup plans for their backup questions. 10 minutes into my presentation, Ryan walked into the conference room with coffee and donuts. "Sorry I'm late," he announced loudly, completely derailing my momentum. Traffic was brutal, but hey, I brought sustenance. The clients laughed, grateful for the interruption. Ryan spent the next 20 minutes telling stories and making everyone comfortable while I watched my carefully structured presentation dissolve into casual conversation. Afterward, Mr. Thompson shook Ryan's hand. "Your brother really knows how to lighten the mood. That's important in business. You know, people need to feel comfortable before they trust you with their money." Ryan beamed like he had closed the deal single-handedly. I wanted to point out that charisma without competence is just expensive entertainment, but I was still 24 and trying to be the good daughter who didn't cause family drama. When Dad announced his retirement plans 18 months ago, I naively thought my track record would speak for itself. 3 years of successful projects, improved efficiency ratings, client satisfaction scores consistently above target. I'd earned my place in leadership through actual results, not family connections. But Dad saw things differently. He saw Ryan's potential where I saw his patterns. He saw leadership qualities where I saw learned helplessness dressed up in expensive suits. "I'm going to start Ryan as director of operations," Dad told me privately before announcing it to the board. "He needs structure, responsibility, a chance to prove himself. I think having real stakes will help him mature." Real stakes, like the Porsche payments, weren't real stakes. Like the DUI fines weren't real stakes. Like the college tuition he'd wasted wasn't real stakes. "Dad," I said carefully, "Ryan doesn't have experience managing teams or overseeing budgets. Maybe he should start in a supervisory role and work his way up." Nonsense. Sometimes you have to push people into the deep end to help them swim. Besides, he'll have you and Richard to guide him, right? I'd get to do the actual work, while Ryan got the title and the credit. The same dynamic that had defined our entire relationship, just with higher stakes and bigger consequences. That night, I went home to my modest apartment, the one I'd chosen based on my salary, not my family's money, and I made a decision. I pulled out the stock certificates Grandpa had left me, the ones gathering dust in my filing cabinet, and I started making calls. If Dad wanted to play family favorites, fine. But this game had rules, and I'd been studying the rule book a lot longer than anyone realized. The beautiful thing about corporate ownership is that it's not about sentiment or potential or giving people chances to grow. It's about mathematics, and I'd always been very good at math. 4 months ago, I made the best investment of my life. Not in cryptocurrency or real estate or some trendy startup. I invested in myself, specifically in the form of buying out my father's shares in Brennan Industries. Dad had been talking about retirement for 2 years, mostly during Sunday dinners after a few glasses of wine. "I'm ready to step back," he'd say. "Let the younger generation take over, travel with your mother, maybe buy that boat I've been wanting." I'd been saving money since I started working, living on roughly half my salary while Ryan lived on roughly twice his, thanks to the First National Bank of Mom and Dad. My apartment was nice, but not fancy. My car was reliable, but not flashy. I bought generic groceries and cooked at home while Ryan Ubered sushi and charged it to credit cards our parents inevitably paid off. When Dad officially announced his retirement timeline, I was ready. "I'd like to make you an offer for your shares," I told him during one of our monthly lunch meetings. We'd started these lunches when I first joined the company, supposedly so he could mentor me in business leadership. Mostly, they were opportunities for him to tell me about Ryan's latest achievements in failing upward. "You want to buy my shares?" Dad looked genuinely surprised. "Sweetheart, that's a huge financial commitment. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility?" I slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, loan pre-approval letters, and a detailed business plan outlining my vision for the company's future. I'd been working on it for months, refining strategies and projecting growth scenarios. "I'm sure, Dad, this company isn't just my job, it's my future." He flipped through the paperwork, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. "This is very thorough, very professional. I had no idea you'd been thinking about this so seriously." That stung a little. I'd been thinking about little else for 3 years, ever since Grandpa died and left me those initial shares. But Dad had been so focused on Ryan's potential that he'd missed my preparation entirely. "What percentage of ownership would this give you?" he asked, pulling out his phone calculator. 72%, I said quietly. The calculator clattered onto the table. 72%? That would make you majority owner. That would make you the decision maker. Yes. Dad stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him recalculating everything he thought he knew about his children's futures. "What about Ryan? What about the directorship we discussed?" "Ryan can still be director," I said carefully, "if he proves he's capable of the role." "If he proves?" Dad's voice carried a warning tone I'd heard him use with demanding clients. "Olivia, he's your brother. Family supports family. Family also holds family accountable. We finished lunch in relative silence, Dad reviewing my proposal while I pretended to be interested in my salad. Finally, he signed the papers, but not before extracting a promise that I wouldn't do anything to deliberately undermine Ryan's chance at leadership. Give him a real opportunity to succeed, Dad said. Don't set him up to fail just because you disagree with my decision. I agreed, of course. I shook his hand, deposited the signed contracts with our lawyer, and officially became the majority shareholder in Brennan Industries. But here's the thing about promises. You make sure they're specific. Dad asked me not to set Ryan up to fail. He didn't ask me to set him up to succeed either. And he definitely didn't ask me to bail him out when his own actions created predictable consequences. I kept my new ownership status quiet, not because I was ashamed of it, but because information is power, and power is most effective when people underestimate it. Ryan spent the next 4 months preparing for his directorship like he was training for the Olympics of middle management. He read business books Dad recommended, attended leadership seminars Mom found online, and practiced giving presentations in front of our bathroom mirror. He even bought new suits, charging them to a credit card Dad would eventually pay off because image matters in corporate leadership. The irony was delicious. Ryan was working harder to look like an executive than he'd ever worked at actually being one, while I quietly consolidated control of the company he thought he was inheriting. Uncle Richard knew, of course, as CEO, he had to be informed about major ownership changes, but he also understood the value of patience and strategic timing. "When are you planning to tell them?" he asked during one of our weekly strategy meetings. "When the information becomes relevant," I said. "And when might that be?" I smiled. "Oh, I think I'll know the moment when I see it." 3 weeks later, Ryan walked into his first board meeting as director, ready to make his mark on the family business. He had no idea the family business now belonged to his little sister. The silence in the conference room stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Ryan sat frozen in his chair, mouth slightly open, looking like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. Uncle Richard was still chuckling, shaking his head like he'd watched the world's most predictable magic trick. 72%? Ryan repeated slowly, like he was translating a foreign language. "But that's not possible. Dad said I was going to be running operations." He said, "Dad said you'd be director." I corrected him, settling back into my chair. "And technically, you still can be. You'll just be directing things under my authority as majority owner, and as of this moment, CEO. The color was returning to Ryan's face, but not in a good way. He was shifting from pale shock to red-faced anger, which was usually when he made his worst decisions. Sandra from accounting was trying very hard not to smile. Mike from operations had given up trying and was grinning openly. These were people who'd worked with both of us for years, who'd watched Ryan coast on charm while I actually did the work. Uncle Richard straightened his tie and addressed the room with the kind of gravitas you'd expect from someone passing down a family legacy. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've had the privilege of serving as CEO for 15 years, working alongside 2 generations of the Brennan family. It's been an honor, but it's time to pass the torch to someone who truly understands what this company can become." He turned to me and his smile was genuine, proud even. "Olivia has shown exceptional leadership, innovative thinking, and the kind of strategic vision that will take us into our next phase of growth. She's earned this position through merit, not inheritance." The applause started again, more sustained. This time, people were standing, and I felt something I'd never experienced in this building before. Recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that I belonged here, not as someone's daughter or someone's sister, but as myself. Ryan finally found his voice. "This is insane. Dad would never have sold you controlling interest if he'd known you were planning to pull something like this." "Pull something like what?" I asked innocently. "Use standard corporate governance to ensure qualified leadership? Funny how that sounds like pulling something when it doesn't benefit you." "You know what I mean," Ryan snapped. "You manipulated him into selling you those shares." Uncle Richard's expression hardened. "Ryan, I'd be very careful about accusing your sister of manipulation. Your father made a business decision based on Olivia's presentation and qualifications. If you'd like to review the documentation, I'm happy to arrange that." The room was getting uncomfortable now. Sandra was studying her notes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Mike was suddenly fascinated by his coffee cup. Even our intern Jessica looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But I wasn't uncomfortable. For the first time in my professional life, I felt exactly where I was supposed to be. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm and professional, "you have a choice here. You can accept the director position and prove you're capable of handling it, or you can continue arguing and prove you're not. But either way, this meeting has a purpose beyond family drama." I stood up and moved to the whiteboard, where I'd prepared an agenda that didn't include Ryan's emotional breakdown anywhere on the list. "We need to discuss Q3 projections, the Morrison contract renewal, and staff development initiatives for next quarter. Uncle Richard, would you like to handle the transition formalities now, or would you prefer to address those separately?" "Now works perfectly," he said, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed before. "I prepared these documents yesterday, anticipating this moment." Ryan's head snapped toward Uncle Richard. "Yesterday? You knew about this yesterday?" "I've known about Olivia's ownership status for months. I've also known she was the logical choice for CEO succession. The only question was timing." I felt a surge of gratitude toward my uncle, who'd been quietly supporting my leadership development while everyone else was focused on Ryan's potential. "So this was all planned," bitterly said. "A setup?" "No," I said firmly. "This was inevitable. The moment you decided your first act as director would be firing me. You made it clear you don't understand how business works. In any company, trying to fire the majority shareholder is grounds for immediate termination." Ryan slumped in his chair, the weight of his miscalculation finally sinking in. Around the table, people were exchanging glances that said the same thing. This had been a long time coming. Uncle Richard handed me a leather portfolio embossed with the company logo. "Congratulations, CEO Brennan. The company is in excellent hands." As I accepted the portfolio, I thought about Grandpa Henry and how proud he'd be to see his boring stock certificates finally revealing their true value. I thought about all the Sunday dinners where I'd bitten my tongue while Ryan got praise for doing the bare minimum. But mostly, I thought about the future and how much better it was going to be now that merit finally mattered more than gender and birth order. The meeting continued with actual business, and for the first time in years, everyone in the room was focused on the right priorities. The first item on my agenda as CEO was remarkably simple: figuring out what to do with a director who just tried to fire his new boss. Ryan sat slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, probably wondering if this was all some elaborate nightmare he'd wake up from eventually. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. "Ryan," I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared weeks ago because I'm nothing if not thorough, "we need to discuss your role moving forward." He perked up slightly, hope flickering in his eyes like a candle in a hurricane. "Right. Okay, so I'm still director of operations." "No," I slid the papers across the table. "You're being transferred to regional sales coordinator effective immediately." The silence that followed could have powered a small city. Regional sales coordinator was 3 levels below director, with a salary that wouldn't cover Ryan's monthly bar tab, let alone his lifestyle expectations. Regional sales coordinator. Ryan's voice cracked like he was going through puberty again. That's basically entry level." "It's exactly entry level," I confirmed cheerfully. "Same position any college graduate would start in, if they actually graduated." Uncle Richard cleared his throat diplomatically. "Olivia, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No need," I interrupted. "This is a business decision based on qualifications and performance history. Ryan has never successfully managed a team, a budget, or frankly, his own checking account. Regional sales coordinator is appropriate for his skill level." Sandra from accounting made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. I pretended not to notice. Ryan's face was cycling through colors like a mood ring. "You can't do this. That specifically said I was going to be director. This is family, not some corporate takeover." "Actually, this is exactly a corporate situation," I replied, my voice staying level while my inner teenager did victory laps. And in corporate situations, performance matters more than family connections. Revolutionary concept, I know. Mike from operations leaned forward. What about the director position? Who's taking over those responsibilities? I smiled. This was the fun part. I'm promoting Jennifer Martinez from senior analyst to director of operations. She has an MBA from Kellogg, 5 years of relevant experience, and she's never been arrested for property damage. Jennifer's eyes widened. She'd been hoping for this promotion for 2 years, but Ryan's anticipated appointment had blocked her advancement. Now she was getting the recognition she'd actually earned. Jennifer's great, Uncle Richard agreed, nodding approvingly. Excellent choice. Finally, Ryan found his voice again. This is insane. You're promoting some random person over your own brother? I'm promoting the most qualified candidate. The fact that she's not related to me is actually a point in her favor. Nepotism hasn't worked out well for this company historically. The meeting wrapped up with assignments for everyone except Ryan, who sat staring at his new job description like it was written in ancient Sanskrit. Regional sales coordinator came with a company car, a 2018 Honda Civic, not the BMW he'd been expecting, and a cubicle instead of the corner office he'd already mentally redecorated. After everyone filed out, Ryan lingered, clearly hoping for a private conversation where sibling loyalty might override business sense. Liv, he started, using the nickname he'd abandoned years ago when it became uncool to be nice to his sister. Come on, you're really going to humiliate me like this? I'm not humiliating you, I said, packing up my notes. Your actions humiliated you. I'm just managing the consequences. What do you want me to do? Beg? I paused, considering this. Actually, yeah, I think begging might be educational for you. Ryan's jaw dropped. He'd expected me to cave, to prioritize family harmony over accountability, like our parents always had. The realization that I wasn't going to rescue him from his own choices was clearly a new experience. Please, he said quietly, I need this job. I need the money. Then you should have thought about that before trying to fire me in front of the entire board. I walked toward the door, then paused. And Ryan, your first sales report is due Friday. Don't be late. What do you think will happen next? Will Ryan accept his new reality, or will family pressure force Olivia to reconsider? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The family emergency meeting was called for Sunday dinner, exactly 3 days after what Mom was now referring to as the incident. I arrived fashionably on time to find the whole crew assembled in the living room, like some sort of dysfunctional tribunal. Mom had stress cleaned the house to within an inch of its life. Dad was pacing like a caged lion in an expensive sweater. Ryan sat on the couch looking like he'd been hit by a truck carrying karma. Olivia, Dad started before I'd even taken my coat off. We need to discuss the situation at the office. Which situation? I asked innocently, settling into the armchair that used to be Grandpa's. The one where I became CEO of the company I own, or the one where I gave Ryan a job appropriate to his qualifications? Mom made that little huffing sound she'd perfected over 30 years of managing family crises. Don't be sarcastic, dear. This is serious. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Attempting to fire the majority shareholder is very serious. In most companies, it would result in immediate termination, not just demotion. Ryan finally spoke up. I didn't know you owned that much of the company. Ignorance isn't a defense for poor judgment, I replied. Besides, even if I'd been a regular employee, announcing your intention to fire people in your first meeting isn't exactly leadership material. Dad stopped pacing and turned to face me. Olivia, I understand you're upset about Ryan's choice of words, but don't you think this punishment is a bit harsh? He's your brother, he added, and he's also someone who just demonstrated he makes impulsive decisions without gathering basic information first. Would you want that person managing million-dollar operations? The room fell silent. Even Ryan seemed to realize that arguing his qualifications might not be his strongest strategy. Look, Ryan can work his way up like everyone else. If he proves himself in sales, shows he can handle responsibility without constant supervision, then we can discuss advancement opportunities. Mom leaned forward, deploying her most serious maternal expression. But sweetheart, Ryan has bills, car payments, credit cards. He can't afford to take such a massive pay cut. I almost laughed. Almost. Mom, Ryan's financial problems stem from lifestyle choices, not insufficient income. Maybe earning less will help him learn to live within his means. That's cold, Ryan muttered. That's reality, I shot back. Most people figure out budgeting before they turn 30. Dad tried a different approach. What if we compromise? Keep Ryan in a supervisory role, maybe assistant director. Give him a chance to learn the ropes gradually. Dad, I appreciate that you want to help Ryan, but this isn't about family favoritism anymore. This is about running a business effectively. Would you ask Uncle Richard to compromise on hiring decisions based on someone's feelings? The comparison hit home. Dad had always prided himself on Britain Industries' professional standards, on building something bigger than just a family employment program. Besides, I added, this could be good for Ryan. He's never had to actually work for anything. Maybe starting from the bottom will teach him skills he's been lacking. Ryan's head snapped up. Skills I've been lacking. Time management, accountability, financial responsibility, professional communication. I listed on my fingers. Should I continue? Those are personal issues, he protested. They don't affect my work performance. I stared at him. Ryan, you were fired from your last 3 jobs for attendance problems. Your personal issues are your work performance. Mom tried to intervene. Now, children, let's not get personal. Everything about this is personal, I interrupted. Ryan's entire career has been based on personal connections instead of professional competence. That ends now. Dad sat down heavily, looking older than I'd seen him in years. I just wanted to give him an opportunity to succeed. Then you should be happy, I said more gently. This is his opportunity. He can prove himself through actual performance instead of family obligations. If he succeeds, he'll have earned it. If he doesn't, we'll know it's not the right fit. The conversation continued for another hour, with various family members suggesting alternatives, compromises, and face-saving measures that would essentially maintain the status quo. But I held firm. Ryan would start in sales on Monday, or he could find employment elsewhere. Those were his options. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. This isn't over. I smiled and typed back, you're absolutely right. Your real education is just beginning. Some people learn from consequences. Others just get angrier when consequences finally catch up with them. I was about to find out which category my brother belonged to. Ryan's first week as a regional sales coordinator was, to put it diplomatically, a learning experience for everyone involved. And by everyone, I mean mostly Jennifer Martinez, who had the unfortunate responsibility of training him while simultaneously learning her new director role. He's enthusiastic, Jennifer reported during our weekly one-on-one, choosing her words carefully. But, I prompted, but he seems to think sales calls should involve a lot more talking about himself and a lot less listening to client needs. This wasn't surprising. Ryan had always been more interested in being impressive than being useful. Give me specifics, I said, pulling out my notepad. Jennifer consulted her notes. Yesterday, he spent 45 minutes telling Mrs. Chen of Pacific Manufacturing about his vision for revolutionizing the industry. She called afterward asking if we had any other representatives she could work with. I pinched the bridge of my nose. What was he supposed to be selling her? Routine maintenance contract renewal should have been a 15-minute conversation. Classic Ryan. Take a simple task and somehow make it about his personal brand instead of the client's actual needs. Anything else? I asked. He's been telling people he's temporarily in sales while preparing for executive leadership. Several clients have asked if there's instability in our management structure. That was a problem. The last thing we needed was clients questioning company stability because Ryan couldn't accept his new reality gracefully. I'll handle it, I assured Jennifer. How are you settling into the director role? Her face brightened immediately. It's incredible. I have so many ideas for streamlining operations, and the team has been really supportive. Mike's been great about explaining the technical aspects I haven't dealt with before. This was exactly what competent promotion looked like. Jennifer was asking questions, learning systems, and building relationships with her team. Ryan was talking about himself and confusing customers. After Jennifer left, I called Mike to get his perspective on Ryan's performance. Honest assessment, Mike said. He's not malicious, just completely unprepared for actual work. He shows up on time, which is an improvement from what I've heard about his previous jobs, but he doesn't seem to understand that sales requires understanding what people want to buy. Has he responded to feedback? That's the interesting part. When Jennifer tries to coach him, he listens politely and then completely ignores everything she said. It's like he thinks this is all temporary until I come to my senses and promote him back to director. I thanked Mike and hung up, already formulating my next conversation with Ryan. If he thought this was some elaborate bluff designed to teach him a lesson, he was about to discover how wrong he was. I found Ryan in his cubicle, looking supremely uncomfortable in the shared workspace. He was staring at his computer screen like it contained ancient hieroglyphics. "How's the first week going?" I asked, perching on the edge of his desk. He glanced around nervously. Fine, good, just getting used to the system." "Jennifer mentioned you're having some challenges with client communication." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Jennifer's been great, but she doesn't really understand my approach. I prefer building relationships first, establishing trust before jumping into sales pitches." "That's an interesting interpretation," I said. "What did Mrs. Chen want when you called her?" "Well, she wanted to renew her maintenance contract, but—" "And did she renew it?" "She's still considering her options." I pulled up Mrs. Chen's file on my phone. "She's worked with us for 8 years, Ryan. Her renewals are usually automatic. The fact that she's considering options after your call means you actively talked her out of doing business with us." Ryan's face flushed. "That's not— I was just trying to add value by making her question whether we're the right company for her needs." He slumped in his chair. "Fine, maybe I oversold it a little." "Ryan, listen carefully. Sales isn't about impressing people with your vision for the industry. It's about solving their specific problems. Mrs. Chen doesn't care about revolution. She cares about keeping her equipment running efficiently at a fair price." "I know that." "Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Mrs. Chen back, apologize for the confusion, and have a simple conversation about her maintenance needs. Jennifer will listen in to provide coaching. If she renews, great. If not, we'll discuss whether sales is the right fit for you." Ryan looked up at me with something approaching panic. "And if it's not the right fit, then you'll need to find employment elsewhere," I said matter-of-factly. "This isn't a charity, Ryan. It's a business." As I walked away, I heard him pick up the phone. Maybe he'd figure it out, maybe he wouldn't, but either way, he was finally going to learn that showing up isn't the same as performing. The best part? For the first time in his life, the consequences of his choices would actually affect him instead of someone else cleaning up his mess. 3 weeks into Ryan's sales career, I received an unexpected visitor. Dad walked into my office without knocking, which was unlike him, and sat down across from my desk with the kind of serious expression usually reserved for major family announcements. "We need to talk," he said. I saved the spreadsheet I was working on and gave him my full attention. "About Ryan. He came to see me yesterday. He's struggling, Olivia. Really struggling." I leaned back in my chair. "Struggling how? Financially? Emotionally?" "He's behind on his rent, his car payment. He had to move out of his apartment and back in with your mother and me." This wasn't surprising news, but it also wasn't my problem. "Dad, Ryan's financial difficulties are the result of years of poor decisions. 1 month of earning an appropriate salary didn't create this situation, but it's making it worse." Dad insisted. He can't afford his lifestyle on what you're paying him. Then he needs to change his lifestyle, I replied. Most people figure out how to live within their means. Dad was quiet for a moment, studying me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. When did you become so hard? The question stung more than I expected. I'm not hard, Dad. I'm consistent. Ryan has never faced real consequences for his choices because someone always bailed him out. You, Mom, creditors who knew the family would eventually pay his debts. That ends now. He's your brother, and he tried to fire me at his first board meeting. Being related to someone doesn't excuse professional incompetence. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know Ryan made a mistake. Dad, it wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. Ryan deliberately announced his intention to fire people he deemed unworthy. The only mistake was assuming he had the authority to do it. What do you want me to say, Olivia? That I was wrong to give him the director position? I had been waiting 3 weeks for someone in my family to acknowledge this basic reality. Were you wrong? Another long pause. Maybe, but that doesn't mean the punishment has to be permanent. It's not punishment, it's employment. Ryan has a job that matches his qualifications. If he wants a better job, he can earn it through performance. Dad pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. Look at this. The message was from Ryan, time-stamped at 2 a.m. Dad, I can't do this anymore. I'm failing at everything and I don't know how to fix it. Maybe Olivia's right about me. Despite everything, reading that message made my chest tighten. Ryan was genuinely struggling, not just financially, but emotionally. For the first time in his life, he was confronting the gap between his self-image and his actual capabilities. This breaks my heart, Dad continued. He's always been confident, maybe too confident, but now he's questioning everything about himself. Maybe that's not a bad thing, I said quietly. Confidence without competence is just delusion. If Ryan's finally questioning whether he's as great as he thought he was, that might be the beginning of actual growth, or it might break him completely. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Below, I could see Ryan's Honda Civic parked next to Jennifer's SUV. 6 months ago, he'd been driving a leased BMW and complaining that it wasn't impressive enough. Dad, do you remember when Ryan was 16 and wrecked Mom's car? Of course. He was speeding in the rain and you bought him a new car the next week because you felt bad that he was upset about the accident. Dad was quiet. Do you remember when he failed calculus senior year and you hired 3 different tutors instead of making him repeat the class? The tutors helped him graduate on time. They helped him avoid consequences, I corrected. And every time you rescued him from failure, you taught him that his choices don't really matter because someone else will always fix the damage. I turned back to face him. Ryan isn't struggling because I'm being mean to him. He's struggling because he's finally experiencing what most people call normal adult responsibility. Dad stood up slowly. So you're not going to help him? I am helping him. I'm giving him the opportunity to develop actual skills instead of relying on family connections. If he succeeds in sales, proves he can handle responsibility, then we'll talk about advancement. But the days of automatic promotion based on last name are over. As Dad reached the door, he paused. Your grandfather would be proud of your business sense. I just hope he'd approve of how you're treating family. After he left, I sat alone in my office thinking about Grandpa Henry and the lessons he'd tried to teach both Ryan and me. He'd shown Ryan the fun parts of business, the client dinners, the handshake deals, the excitement of closing contracts, but he's shown me the foundation work, the analysis, the planning, the careful decision-making that made everything else possible. Maybe Grandpa had known all along which one of us would actually be capable of running the company. Maybe those stock certificates weren't a consolation prize, but a test waiting to see what I'd do with real responsibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Office hours are 9 to 5. Schedule an appointment with my assistant. Some conversations are worth having, but they need to happen on professional terms, not family guilt trips. Ryan's appointment was scheduled for Thursday at 3 p.m. He arrived 15 minutes early, which was possibly the most professional thing he'd done since starting his new position. My assistant, Carol, announced him with the same formality she used for any other employee request. He walked into my office looking like he'd lost weight and sleep in equal measure. Gone was the cocky swagger I'd grown accustomed to over the years. This was a different Ryan, one I wasn't sure I recognized. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, sitting down without being invited. "Old habits," I replied. "You have 15 minutes, I added, glancing at my calendar. "What did you want to discuss?" Ryan took a deep breath, like he was preparing to jump off a cliff. "I want to apologize." This was unexpected. In 30 years of being his sister, I could count Ryan's genuine apologies on one hand with fingers left over. "For what specifically?" I asked. "For trying to fire you, for assuming I deserved a position I hadn't earned, for—" He paused, running his hands through his hair. "For being the kind of person who thought announcing firings in my first meeting was good leadership." I set down my pen and really looked at him. The Ryan I'd known my whole life was always performing, always trying to impress someone or charm his way out of consequences. This version seemed stripped of those defenses. "What brought this on?" I asked. "Failure," he said simply. "Complete, undeniable failure at something I thought would be easy. Sales. Everything. Sales, budgeting, basic adult responsibility. Do you know I didn't even know how to read a profit and loss statement until Jennifer explained it to me last week?" I didn't know that, but I wasn't surprised. Ryan had coasted through business school without learning fundamental concepts, assuming someone else would handle the technical details while he provided vision and leadership. "Jennifer's been helping you. She's been incredibly patient, actually. More patient than I deserve." Ryan looked out the window toward the sales floor. "She explained that good leaders learn their team's job so they can support them effectively. I never did that. I just assumed being in charge meant telling people what to do." This was the most self-awareness I'd ever heard from my brother. "What else have you learned?" I asked. "That I've been a spoiled brat who confused privilege with talent." He met my eyes directly. "And that you've been covering for my incompetence for years while I took credit for work I didn't understand." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. "Ryan, this is—" I struggled for words. "This is not the conversation I expected to have." "I know. Trust me. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have been capable of having it." He shifted in his chair. "But losing everything, fake success, family bailouts, the image of myself I'd built up, it's been clarifying. Clarifying how I finally understand why Grandpa left you the stock certificates." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He saw what I couldn't see, what none of us wanted to acknowledge. "You were the one actually learning the business while I was learning how to look like I belonged in it. He wasn't giving you a consolation prize. He was ensuring the company would survive." The weight of that realization settled between us. Grandpa Henry had been playing a longer game than any of us understood, making decisions based on competence rather than family dynamics. "Does this mean you're ready to take the sales position seriously?" I asked. "I'm ready to take employment seriously, period. Whether that's here or somewhere else." Ryan's voice was steady, resigned, but not bitter. "I know I don't deserve special treatment just because I'm your brother. If anything, I should probably be held to higher standards." I leaned back in my chair, processing this transformation. The Ryan I'd grown up with was competitive, entitled, always looking for shortcuts. This person seemed to understand that there weren't any. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, standing up. "Just the opportunity to prove I can handle basic responsibilities without family interference. If I succeed in sales, great. If I don't, I'll find something else." As he reached the door, he turned back. "Olivia, thank you for what?" for not rescuing me when everyone else wanted to. Turns out, drowning was exactly what I needed to learn how to swim. After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the family photo on my desk. It was from last Christmas. All of us gathered around the tree, everyone smiling at the camera except Ryan, who was checking his phone. 6 months ago, that photo represented everything I thought was wrong with our family dynamics. Now, it looked like the last picture of who we used to be before we became who we needed to be. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Brennan, Mrs. Chen from Pacific Manufacturing is online too. She says she wants to thank you for your brother's excellent service and finalize her contract renewal. I smiled as I picked up the phone. Sometimes the most unexpected transformations happen when people finally stop running from reality and start learning to live in it. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where this whole story began, but everything had changed. The quarterly board meeting was running smoothly, with Jennifer presenting operational improvements that had increased efficiency by 23%. Uncle Richard, officially retired but still attending meetings as advisor emeritus, beamed with pride at the company's performance. Ryan sat at the far end of the table, notepad open, actively listening to Jennifer's presentation. He'd earned his seat back through 6 months of consistent performance, starting with Mrs. Chen's renewal and building to becoming our most reliable sales coordinator. Not the most charismatic, not the highest earner, but the most dependable. Ryan, I said, would you like to present the Q4 sales projections? He nodded and stood up, consulting notes he'd actually prepared instead of winging it. Based on current client retention and new account development, we're projecting a 12% increase in sales revenue for Q4. His presentation was thorough, accurate, and boring in the best possible way. No grand visions, no revolutionary industry insights, just solid analysis based on actual data. Excellent work, Uncle Richard said when Ryan finished. That's exactly the kind of steady growth that builds sustainable success. After the meeting ended and everyone filed out, Ryan approached my desk. Thanks for letting me present today. I know I haven't earned back full director privileges yet. Actually, I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared that morning, I wanted to discuss that with you. Ryan's expression immediately became guarded. If this is about the Morrison account issue, I already spoke with Jennifer about adjusting my approach. It's not about Morrison, I interrupted, smiling. It's about this. I handed him a letter of recommendation I'd written to Denver Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had contacted me about potential management candidates. He read it slowly, his eyebrows climbing higher with each paragraph. You're recommending me for a management position at another company? Associate sales manager specifically, it's perfect for your current skill level with room for advancement based on performance. The salary is 40% higher than what you're making here. He set the letter down carefully. Why are you helping me get a job somewhere else? Because you've proven you can handle responsibility, and because Denver needs someone with your particular skills combination and humility. Also, I grinned, because you'll be much less tempting for mom and dad to interfere with if you're not working at the family company. Ryan laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from him in years. You're probably right about that. But Olivia, what if I mess this up? What if 6 months of good performance doesn't mean I've actually changed? Then you'll deal with the consequences like an adult, I said simply. But I don't think you'll mess it up. You've learned something that can't be unlearned. What's that? That respect is earned through competence, not inherited through genetics. He was quiet for a moment, then extended his hand for a formal handshake. Thank you, Olivia, for everything, even for the parts that sucked at the time. Especially for the parts that sucked, I corrected, shaking his hand. Those were the parts that mattered. As I watched Ryan walk out of my office, I thought about the morning 6 months ago when he'd tried to fire me in front of the entire board. He was so certain that being promoted to director would solve all his problems, that title and authority would magically transform him into the leader he thought he deserved to be. Turns out, the transformation came from losing the title, not gaining it. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Brennan, Mrs. Chen from Pacific Manufacturing is online too. She says she wants to thank you for your brother's excellent service and finalize her contract renewal. I smiled as I picked up the phone. Sometimes the most unexpected transformations happen when people finally stop running from reality and start learning to live in it. A year later, Ryan sent me a photo from the Denver Industries holiday party, where he was receiving an Employee Recognition Award for outstanding customer service. He was standing next to his manager, both holding certificates and grinning at the camera. The text that came with the photo was simple. Turns out, earning something feels a lot better than being handed it. Thanks for teaching me the difference. I saved the photo and filed it away with Grandpa Henry's business ledger and fountain pen. Some inheritance comes in the form of property and possessions. The best inheritance comes in the form of lessons about character, competence, and the courage to hold people you love accountable for becoming their best selves. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what they want, it's what they need, even when they hate you for it in the moment. Ryan hated me for exactly 3 months. Then he thanked me for the next 3 years. I'd call that a pretty good return on investment. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, professional growth, and sometimes painful process of learning that merit matters more than birthright. Remember, you're never too old to learn accountability, and you're never too young to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything you thought you want.